All right, guys. Wanted to have this done for you yesterday, but it turns out that all of my seniors decided to come back in and see me on their fall break, which is great, but I wanted to get this done. So here we are on a rainy hurricane Matthew Saturday, going over a real quick world history review for you of what we've got going on. When we last left off, we have President Abraham Lincoln is going to run for the president. He wasn't president yet. He is going to run against Stephen Douglas for the Northern Democrats, and because the Democratic ticket split over the issue of slavery, John Breckinridge will run as the Southern Democratic candidate for president. And over here we have the do-nothing candidate, a guy named John Bell. So 4 guys are running for president in 1860. President Lincoln isn't even on the ballot in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 states. He doesn't even show up. But you can look at the red states here. He wins all of these states. He gets 59% of the electoral vote, but only 40% of the popular vote. But he wins. The first election that Abraham Lincoln ever wins is this one. But if you combine the tickets for Lincoln, John Bell, and Stephen Douglas, the Unionist candidates, it's clearly almost 80% of the vote in the country at the time. So everybody wants to stay together. But immediately after Lincoln is elected, the Charleston Mercury says, the tea has been thrown overboard, let the Revolution of 1860 begin, and South Carolina secedes on December 20th. And then from their point on, all the states, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Texas, they all begin to secede by January 19th. It looks like there are 2 countries, and a Confederate Constitution meets in Montgomery, Alabama on February 4th, where they elect Mr. Jefferson Davis as the first and only president of the Confederacy. Unfortunately, he is home very sick and very ill with malaria, and that's why they elect him, because he wasn't there to say no. His running mate is his vice president is Alexander Stephens, a guy who did not like secession and was a very good friend of President Abraham Lincoln. That takes us to the crisis at Fort Sumter, where Major John Anderson of the United States moves his men from Fort Moultrie on the Charleston coastline, getting pounded by Hurricane Matthew right now, out to Fort Sumter, a brand spanking new fort for his men to be safe. And he will go against his former student. Pierre Gustave Toutant Beauregard was the best artillery student Anderson ever taught at West Point, and he sieges his one-time friend. And President John Buchanan does nothing to assist John Anderson. He tries to send some food in a ship called Star of the West, but it was fired upon, so it turns around and leaves. Buchanan leaves the mess for Abraham Lincoln to deal with. And as they were running out of food, Lincoln will come in and tell Anderson to stay there. He's going to figure something out. And they meet in April 12th, and they say, look, man, you got to leave or I've got to fire upon you very shortly here. And as they start talking and meeting, Beauregard delivers the message, if you're not out by 4:30 a.m., I'm going to open fire. And Anderson says, look, if you wait a couple more days, we're going to be out of food. Don't worry about it. We'll just leave. While Anderson is dealing with that information, Edmund Ruffin, a crazy Virginia secessionist, lights a cannon and fires on Fort Sumter. When the cannon blast goes off, all the other gunners believe it is the sign to shoot. And so Fort Sumter, who looked like this big giant home plate, 2 stories tall, walls 8 to 12 foot thick, are blasted for 33 straight hours, and when they're done, the beautiful fort was reduced almost to rubble. John Anderson asks if he can take down the flag and fire a 50-gun salute, He is given permission to do so and leave the fort. A gun backfires, killing one of the Union soldiers. The opening casualty of the Civil War was a gun that backfired. While all this is going on, President Abraham Lincoln comes to the White House. There is an assassination attempt on him right away before he even gets there. So he comes into town undercover at nighttime, beginning what would just be a horrible time for the president. He had just buried a son back in Chicago. His wife was depressed not only from that, but she was leaving her family. They were going to the White House. And Lincoln gets there and finds out that his cabinet thought that he was a dumb idiot, that he was going to be a puppet, and they were going to be the marionettes that pulled his strings. And that if anything went wrong, they could blame it on him. So he comes out on his inauguration and gives a great speech where he says the Union is going to hold, occupy, or possess all federal installations in the southern United States. Doesn't want to refer to them as a confederacy because that would validate their existence. What you have, you can keep, but we're going to hold on to everything. If there is a war, you will be the ones to determine that, not me. Putting the ball directly in the hands of the Confederates. And when they fire on Fort Sumter, Lincoln says, you fired the first shot, I'm going to begin to raise troops to put down this rebellion. Problem is, there's no soldiers in and around Washington. Most are out west fighting the Indians. So newly trained, ill-disciplined soldiers are coming through Baltimore when they have to get on off one train, walk a little bit through town to get on a southbound train. And while they're doing that, they are attacked by a bunch of professional criminals known as plug uglies. When a wine bottle is busted over someone's head, they panic. They begin to, big gust of wind there, whoa. They begin to panic and shots are fired. There's a running battle, a running melee right in Baltimore that leaves 12 civilians dead while the soldiers get on the train and get to Washington. And the governor says, look, Lincoln, you got to get these guys. You can't send your soldiers through here. And Lincoln says, you either control your guys or I'll do it. Meanwhile, out west, every state is given a quota of soldiers. And guys are signing up in droves. For them, this is a chance of a lifetime, a 90-day enlistment. The spring crops are planted. They really got nothing to do till harvest. They're going to go and have fun, and they're going to go in the army. They can get off the farm or out of the factory and maybe see another wife not named Mom, or another girl not named Mom, excuse me, another wife. Ooh, man, sorry about that. They're going to get paid, they're going to get a gun, they're going to get food, and everyone is super pumped and excited. And whole towns sign up, and mayors and pastors are made officers, and they really don't know what they're doing. It's kind of like fun. It's being at summer camp. Until they get to Washington, where drill instructors show up, mainly from Germany. Scary men who they're going to turn them in how to be a soldier. This guy here is the guy with the pistol. He's backing away from a guy with a sword. These were holiday soldiers. They didn't really know what war was going to be like. And now all of a sudden, marching on the Washington Mall with the Germans yelling at them is kind of a scary thing. And so the president calls in Winfield Scott, a legendary American hero, and says, Winfield, what's our plan? And Winfield says, well, I'm going to call it the Anaconda Plan. Big snake sounds scary. We're going to squeeze the Confederacy to death. We're going to use the Navy to blockade all of their ports. Nothing will go in, nothing will come out. Confederacy has got to sell cotton and tobacco to make money. If they can't, they're going to be even more broke than they are already. We're going to capture New Orleans and the Mississippi River to cut their lifeline from out west. Then we're going to go and we're going to take Richmond. The president says, well, who can lead this army? Winfield says, man, I'm too fat and too old. If there's one man that can do it, let it be Robert E. Lee. Robert was home visiting his wife, who is very ill. He is offered the top job by Montgomery Blair, and he turns it down. He says, no, he must stay with his home state of Virginia. So he turns it down. A couple days later, Virginia secedes and he accepts a position of General of the Home Guard, the old men and boys of Virginia. And so here it is. These are the blue states, as I did the tail of the tape, versus the Confederacy. And the Union has, 23 states. They've got 100,000 factories employing 1.1 million workers. They've got 56 million in gold reserve. They own 81% of all the bank deposits in the country. Economically, on paper, the Confederacy shouldn't have a chance. Whatever the Union couldn't make for themselves, they could buy it. And just like in World War II, everything that the Union needed, it could get. Plus, it had enough railroad track to move its army from point A to point B. The other thing very rarely mentioned is the Union was also able to outproduce the South in all other agricultural crops except for cotton. Tobacco and stuff, as we talked about in class, had kind of fallen off at this point, and it's all about cotton, feeding the industrial mills of New England and more often than not over in London. So the South can feed itself while the Confederacy can't. They only have 100,000 factories, all right, or 20,000 factories employing 100,000 workers. The Union has 100,000 factories. All right? They've got a factory for every Southern factory worker. They don't have any mechanisms if their railroad track gets damaged, they have no steam engines, no steel melting or smelting to repair it. They just, economically, they don't have anything. They're cash poor but land rich. The few intangibles they do possess is they are fighting for their homeland. And a person fighting for their homeland is very powerful, as most battles will be fought in the South. Also, the Confederates all know how to shoot. They're woodsmen. They know what their trade is. They know how to get this done. But when it's all said and done, there should be no way this thing should take very long because the North is just so economically powerful. And so hapless Irvin McDowell, this is here as a young man, is sent to take the untrained troops down to Bull Run, Manassas, to smite the Confederates. On to Richmond was the battle cry. And the senators and congressmen were up on a hill. They were going to bring champagne and hold a victory ball in the governor's mansion. And even though they were ill-trained and they could barely go forward, the Union almost wins the victory when Thomas Jackson and his men from Virginia unleashed the rebel yell and slammed into the untrained troops. And not knowing what to do, they simply could not retreat back across the creek in good order, and the Confederates win an amazing upstart victory. So there is your recap here for Test 2. Hope to do these more routinely if we can just get a few minutes break some days. All right, guys. Ask me questions if you have them.